Claire's champagne glass slipped against the crystal tray the instant Ethan smiled beneath the blindfold. Who had he just recognized? Golden candlelight shimmered across the ballroom ceiling, reflecting from towering crystal chandeliers onto polished oak floors that gleamed like still water. A string quartet played softly near the grand staircase while the scent of white roses, vanilla wedding cake, and fresh champagne drifted through the air. Everything looked exactly the way Claire Bennett had imagined during 12 months of planning. Every chair wore an ivory ribbon. Every table displayed handwritten place cards. Every detail promised a beginning. Standing in the center of the reception hall in her satin wedding gown, Claire watched guests gather into a wide circle, their laughter echoing beneath the vaulted ceiling as Ethan Walker allowed his best man to tie a black silk blindfold securely around his eyes. No cheating, someone joked from the crowd. Ethan raised both hands with an easy grin. I won't need to. More laughter followed. Claire smiled automatically, smoothing the front of her dress where tiny pearl buttons caught the warm light. Her maid of honor, Olivia Hayes, leaned close enough for her perfume to mingle with the scent of roses. This'll be cute, Olivia whispered. You'll see. The game had been suggested only minutes earlier after dinner. One by one, several bridesmaids would stand before Ethan while he remained blindfolded. He would identify his bride using only the touch of her hand. It sounded harmless. Romantic, even. Guests lifted phones to record the moment. A photographer crouched near the dance floor, adjusting the focus on his camera as flashes bounced gently across the ballroom. The first bridesmaid stepped forward. Ethan reached out carefully, brushed his fingertips across her knuckles, then laughed. Not Claire. Cheers erupted. The second woman deliberately squeezed his fingers, drawing another round of laughter before Ethan shook his head again. Definitely not. Claire folded her hands together, feeling the cool metal of her engagement ring against her skin. Then her turn came. She stepped forward without speaking. Ethan's fingers met hers almost immediately. His touch slowed. His thumb traced the edge of her ring before lightly brushing the side of her hand. His smile softened. Claire. Applause filled the room. Someone whistled. Claire laughed with everyone else as Ethan pulled the blindfold halfway up and kissed her forehead. For one perfect second, everything felt exactly right. Then Olivia clapped once. One more, she called playfully. Let's see if he's really that good. Several guests encouraged the idea. Ethan shrugged, laughing again as he lowered the blindfold back into place. Why not? Claire stepped aside while Olivia walked quietly into the circle. No announcement. No dramatic entrance. Only the soft rustle of blue satin against the hardwood floor. Ethan extended his hand. This time something changed. He didn't search uncertainly. He didn't examine fingertips or rings. His hand moved directly toward Olivia's wrist as though guided by memory instead of chance. His thumb brushed lightly across the inside of her wrist before sliding toward her palm. His smile appeared instantly. Not surprised. Not uncertain. Familiar. Olivia, he said without hesitation. The room burst into laughter again. Someone shouted that he deserved extra points. Another guest joked that he knew all the bridesmaids too well. Cameras kept recording. Claire did not laugh. Her eyes remained fixed on Ethan's hand as Olivia quietly pulled hers away a fraction too quickly. Ethan removed the blindfold, still smiling, but the smile faded for the briefest instant when his eyes met Claire's. Neither of them spoke. Around them, music resumed, glasses clinked together, and conversations flowed as though nothing unusual had happened. Claire slowly lowered her hand to her side, her fingertips brushing the satin folds of her wedding gown. Then, without saying a word, she turned toward the bridal suite and walked away while Ethan watched her disappear through the white double doors. Claire closed the bridal suite door behind her, and the laughter from the ballroom became a muffled echo behind thick white panels trimmed with polished brass. The room smelled of fresh lilies, hairspray, and warm candle wax. From the vanity mirrors that framed her reflection in soft amber light, she walked straight to the dressing table without removing her veil, placed both hands against the cool marble countertop, and watched them remain perfectly still. A second later, hurried footsteps crossed the hallway. The doorknob turned. Ethan entered first, still wearing his tuxedo, his bow tie slightly crooked from the blindfold game. Olivia followed close behind, her blue satin dress rustling softly as the door clicked shut. Claire, Ethan said, forcing a small laugh. Everyone's waiting. It was just a silly game. Claire picked up the crystal perfume bottle sitting beside her bouquet. She uncapped it, inhaled the familiar scent of jasmine and cedar, then carefully placed it back exactly where it had been. Only then did she look at him through the mirror. Show me. Ethan frowned. Show you what? The way you found Olivia. The room fell quiet except for the low hum of the air conditioner above them. Olivia crossed her arms, then immediately dropped them again. Claire, you're overthinking this. Claire turned slowly to face both of them. Maybe. She stepped toward Ethan and extended her hand. Close your eyes. He hesitated. Seriously? Close them. He obeyed. Without a blindfold this time. He shut his eyes while Claire slipped her hand into his. His fingers moved uncertainly. They searched for the engagement ring before settling awkwardly around hers. Claire gently pulled away. Now open your eyes. Ethan did. She looked directly at Olivia. Your turn. Olivia blinked. Why? Because I asked. Reluctantly, Olivia offered her hand. Ethan glanced between the two women before taking it. This time he touched her carefully, almost cautiously, as though trying not to repeat whatever had happened minutes earlier. Claire watched every movement instead of their faces. Ethan searched Olivia's fingers first, then her knuckles, then her wrist. His hand paused for the briefest instant before he quickly released it. Nobody laughed. Nobody moved. Claire reached for her bouquet, untied the satin ribbon around the stems, and let the flowers spread gently across the dressing table. White peonies rolled apart, filling the room with their sweet fragrance. When you recognized me, she said quietly, you looked for my ring. She picked up one bloom and laid it beside Ethan's hand. Then she placed another beside Olivia's. When you recognized Olivia? She stopped. Ethan looked down. Olivia remained perfectly still. Claire finished the sentence herself. You didn't search at all. Ethan stepped forward. Claire, listen to me. She raised one hand, stopping him before he came any closer. No. Her voice stayed calm, almost gentle. Now you listen. She gathered the scattered flowers into her arms and carried them to the window overlooking the ballroom. Through the glass, she could see guests smiling, servers pouring champagne, children chasing each other between decorated tables. None of them knew the wedding had already begun to fracture. Claire set the bouquet on the windowsill, turned back toward Ethan and Olivia, and spoke with measured clarity. Neither of you leaves this room until I understand why my fiancé recognized my best friend faster than he recognized the woman he was about to marry. Ethan did not answer immediately. The silence inside the bridal suite stretched until the faint music from the ballroom dissolved into scattered applause from guests who still believed the ceremony would begin at any moment. Warm light from the vanity mirrors reflected across the polished marble countertop, while the scent of roses drifted through the half-open window overlooking the reception garden. Claire remained standing beside it, one hand resting lightly against the white-painted frame, waiting without blinking. Ethan loosened his bow tie with slow fingers. Claire, I don't know why it happened like that. Olivia nodded quickly. Neither do I. Claire looked at neither of them. Instead, she reached for the small brass bell the wedding planner had left on the vanity for last-minute requests. She rang it once. The clear metallic tone echoed through the room. Seconds later, the wedding coordinator opened the door with an uncertain smile. Is everything ready? Claire picked up the printed ceremony schedule lying beside her bouquet. The thick ivory cardstock felt smooth beneath her fingertips. She folded it neatly down the middle before handing it to the coordinator. Please tell the officiant we'll need a delay. The coordinator hesitated. How long? Claire glanced at Ethan, then Olivia. 15 minutes. The coordinator looked from one face to another, sensing the shift in the room without understanding it. I'll let everyone know. The door closed again. The latch clicked softly. Ethan exhaled through his nose. Claire, you're embarrassing yourself over a coincidence. Claire slowly turned toward him. No. Her voice remained level. I'm refusing to ignore one. She crossed the room and picked up the black silk blindfold still lying on the chair where Ethan had tossed it after the game. The fabric slid through her fingers like cool water. She folded it carefully, smoothing every crease before placing it into Ethan's hands. Keep it. He frowned. Why? Because 15 minutes ago it covered your eyes. Claire held his gaze. Nothing covered your instincts. Olivia took one cautious step forward. Claire, please. Everyone out there is waiting for you. Claire nodded once. Exactly. She walked to the bridal suite door, opened it, and stepped into the hallway. Bright chandeliers illuminated the long corridor where bridesmaids, groomsmen, and family members stood chatting in small groups. Their conversations faded the moment they saw the bride walking alone. Claire smiled politely at the wedding coordinator standing nearby. Could you ask everyone to enjoy another round of drinks? The coordinator blinked. Of course. Claire looked past her toward the entrance of the ballroom, where guests laughed over champagne and wedding photos. Nobody is to enter the chapel until I say so. The request traveled quickly through the staff. Servers redirected guests toward the reception area. The string quartet stopped rehearsing. The officiant quietly closed his leather-bound ceremony book. Claire watched the entire schedule shift because of one sentence she had spoken. Then she turned back toward the bridal suite. Ethan had followed her into the hallway. Olivia stood just behind him. Claire faced them both with calm certainty. The ceremony is officially on hold. She paused long enough for the silence to settle over all three of them. And it will stay that way until the two of you stop giving me the same answer and start giving me the truth. : Writing. Edit. The hallway gradually emptied as ushers guided guests back toward the reception hall, where the soft clink of silverware and muted conversations replaced the music that should have accompanied the processional. Sunlight poured through the tall stained glass windows, casting ribbons of blue and gold across the marble floor. Claire watched every movement without speaking. She reached into a nearby refreshment station, picked up 3 identical linen napkins, and folded each one into a neat square. Ethan frowned. What are you doing? Claire carried the napkins back into the bridal suite and laid them side by side on the walnut coffee table. Watching, Olivia let out a quiet breath. Claire, no more explanations. Claire's voice remained calm. Just ordinary moments. She lifted the first napkin and handed it to Ethan. Fold this the way you naturally would. He looked confused, but did it anyway, creasing the fabric once down the middle before smoothing it flat with the side of his hand. Claire said nothing. She handed the second napkin to Olivia. Olivia folded it almost the same way, pressing the exact corner Ethan had pressed first before flattening the cloth with the same sweeping motion. Neither of them noticed. Claire did. She quietly folded the third napkin herself, leaving it untouched except for one simple crease through the center. Then she stacked all 3 together without comment. Ethan gave a frustrated laugh. People fold napkins every day. Exactly, Claire replied. People also build habits every day. She crossed to the vanity where 3 porcelain coffee cups sat on a silver tray, still releasing faint curls of steam. The rich aroma of roasted coffee filled the room. She rearranged the cups into a straight line, then stepped aside. Take whichever cup you want. Ethan reached immediately for the cup on the left. At the same instant, Olivia's hand moved toward the center cup, paused, then shifted naturally to the right without looking. Claire watched the hesitation instead of the choice. Ethan lifted his cup, but never drank. Olivia wrapped both hands around hers, warming her fingers against the porcelain. Claire picked up the untouched center cup herself. Funny, she murmured. Nobody chose the one that interrupted their routine. Ethan set his coffee down with a dull click. You're trying to prove something with every little movement. Claire nodded. I'm trying to understand why every little movement between you feels practiced. She walked toward the window overlooking the courtyard. Outside, photographers continued taking family portraits to fill the unexpected delay. White rose petals drifted across the stone walkway whenever the breeze caught them. Claire rested one hand against the cool glass before turning back. I believe trust was built by big promises. She looked first at Ethan, then Olivia. Now I think it's revealed by the smallest reflexes. Olivia finally stepped forward until only a few feet separated them. I can't change what you think you're seeing. Claire met her eyes steadily. I'm not asking either of you to change my mind. She picked up the stack of folded napkins and placed Ethan's and Olivia's side by side on the table, leaving her own apart from them. The nearly identical creases faced upward in the warm afternoon light. I'm asking you to explain why 2 people who insist nothing unusual exists keep moving through the world like they've already memorized each other. No one answered. Claire slid the bridal suite key from the inside lock, placed it gently on the table between them, and spoke with quiet certainty. Neither of you leaves this room until one of you decides that protecting the truth matters more than protecting the silence. Edit Claire lifted the small brass key from the table and slipped it into the pocket sewn inside her wedding gown. The tiny click of metal against satin was almost lost beneath the distant murmur of guests enjoying the unexpected lunch break. Sunlight poured across the bridal suite, warming the edge of the walnut table while the scent of fresh coffee and white peonies lingered in the still air. Ethan watched her carefully. How long is this supposed to go on? Claire looked at him without raising her voice. Until I know whether the man I'm about to marry is willing to lose someone else to keep me. Olivia lowered her eyes. Ethan frowned. What does that even mean? Claire walked to the center of the room and pulled 2 matching ivory stationery cards from the wedding planner's folder. She laid them side by side and placed a silver fountain pen between them. Write one sentence. Neither moved. To who? Olivia finally asked. To each other, Claire answered. One sentence. It says this. After today, we won't have any contact again if that's what it takes for Claire to trust me. Ethan stared at the blank card. Olivia's fingers remained motionless beside hers. Outside the window, camera shutters clicked as another family posed beneath the rose arch that no bride would walk through today. Claire folded her hands behind her back and waited. The silence stretched until Ethan finally picked up the pen. He uncapped it, held the nib over the paper, then stopped. A tiny drop of black ink touched the card without forming a word. Olivia reached for the second pen, but before it touched the page, she quietly placed it back on the table. Neither card contained a single sentence. Claire nodded once. Thank you. Ethan looked up sharply. For what? She slid both blank cards toward herself. Because I didn't ask you to prove your love for me. She stacked the untouched cards neatly together. I asked whether you were willing to let go of each other. Ethan took one frustrated step forward. You're twisting everything. Claire met his eyes steadily. Then untwist it. Olivia inhaled slowly. Claire, if we agree to never speak again, it won't erase what's already happened today. No, Claire replied. But your first instinct wasn't to reassure me. It was to protect what exists between the two of you. Ethan rubbed both hands across his face before dropping them to his sides. The cuff of his tuxedo brushed the polished edge of the table with a soft scrape. You're asking for something unreasonable. Claire gave a faint, almost sorrowful smile. That's the first honest thing either of you has said. She crossed the room to the door, unlocked it, and opened it halfway. Cool air flowed inside, carrying the aroma of baked bread and roasted vegetables from the ballroom. The wedding coordinator appeared almost instantly. Is it time? She asked hopefully. Claire shook her head. Please tell everyone lunch can continue. The ceremony is postponed until further notice. The coordinator's expression faltered, but she nodded and disappeared down the hallway. Claire closed the door again. She turned back toward Ethan and Olivia. Neither had moved from where they stood. The blank cards remained on the table between them like 2 promises that had never been written. Claire looked first at Ethan, then at Olivia, and quietly said, The wedding can wait. Trust can't. And right now, both of you have shown me exactly which one you're afraid to lose. : Writing. Edit Claire reached into the drawer beneath the vanity and took out the same black silk blindfold that had started everything. The fabric slid between her fingers with a faint whisper, smooth as water under the warm light of the dressing room. Outside, silverware clinked against china as lunch continued in the ballroom, the ordinary sounds of a wedding carrying on while the marriage itself stood perfectly still. Ethan watched the blindfold without speaking. Olivia looked away toward the window where white roses swayed gently beyond the glass. Claire walked into the center of the room and held the ribbon out to Ethan. One last time. He stared at her. Claire, no audience. No jokes. No applause. Just us. She waited until he accepted it. His fingers closed around the satin before he slowly tied it across his eyes. The knot rested neatly behind his head. Claire checked that the blindfold covered every trace of light. Can you see? No. She nodded once. Good. Olivia shifted uneasily. I don't want to do this. Claire met her eyes. Neither did I. She guided Ethan to the center of the Persian rug, then silently led Olivia to stand 6 feet in front of him. Claire herself stepped several feet farther to Ethan's right. The room became almost perfectly silent. Only the low hum of the air conditioner and the distant murmur of guests drifted through the walls. Claire folded her hands behind her back. Don't guess, she said. Don't think. Just reach for the person you believe is me. Ethan remained motionless for several long seconds. Then his right hand lifted. He did not hesitate. His body turned slightly left before his feet even moved, as though following a path it had traveled before. One careful step, then another. Claire never spoke. Olivia held her breath. Ethan stopped directly in front of Olivia. His hand rose naturally until his fingertips brushed the outside of her wrist. The touch lasted less than a heartbeat before his thumb settled instinctively against the inside of her palm. A faint smile crossed his face. Liv. The nickname escaped his lips so quietly it almost disappeared beneath the sound of distant laughter outside the room. Claire closed her eyes for only a moment. When she opened them again, Ethan was already tearing the blindfold away. Color drained from his face. Olivia stepped backward immediately, her hand dropping to her side, as if the contact had burned through every excuse they had repeated all afternoon. The blindfold slipped from Ethan's fingers and landed softly on the rug. Nobody bent to pick it up. Claire crossed the room at an unhurried pace, stopped in front of Ethan, and looked directly into his eyes. You didn't search for me, she said. Her voice remained calm enough that every word seemed sharper. Your body searched for her. Ethan swallowed hard. Claire, I can explain. She shook her head once. Not with another coincidence. The sunlight had shifted lower now, filling the room with long amber shadows that stretched across the hardwood floor. Claire reached toward Ethan's closed hand, gently pressed the velvet ring box more firmly into his palm, and folded his fingers around it. You've spent the last hour telling me what didn't happen, she said. Now you're going to tell me exactly what did. At it, Ethan stood frozen with the velvet ring box clenched in his hand, while the black silk blindfold lay crumpled at his feet, like the final piece of a game nobody wanted to finish. The late afternoon sun poured through the tall windows, turning the floating dust into thin ribbons of gold. Somewhere beyond the closed door, laughter drifted from the reception hall before fading beneath the steady clatter of dishes being cleared away. Claire did not move. Olivia kept her eyes fixed on the floorboards, her fingers twisting the edge of her satin dress until the fabric wrinkled beneath her grip. Ethan finally broke the silence. Before I met you, Olivia and I dated. The words came slowly, each one heavier than the last. Claire neither nodded nor interrupted. Ethan looked toward the window instead of at her. It lasted less than 2 months. We realized we weren't right for each other. We ended it, and months later I met you. Olivia closed her eyes briefly before speaking. When Claire introduced us again, we were both shocked. Her voice barely rose above the whisper of the air conditioner. We agreed it was over. We thought telling you would only hurt you for no reason. Claire walked to the vanity where her bouquet still rested beside scattered peony petals. She picked up one flower whose stem had snapped earlier and rolled it gently between her fingers until a single white petal drifted onto the marble surface. So both of you made that decision together. Neither answered. The silence itself became the answer. Ethan finally stepped closer. We weren't hiding an affair. We weren't seeing each other behind your back. Claire looked at him steadily. I believe you. Ethan blinked, surprised. You do? Yes. She placed the broken flower back on the vanity. I believe you ended whatever relationship you had before I came into your life. Olivia looked up for the first time. Hope flickered across her face. Claire continued before either of them could speak again. But I also believe that every dress fitting, every rehearsal dinner, every engagement party, every smile, every wedding plan was built on a secret that only the two of you were allowed to carry. Ethan lowered his head. The ring box slipped from his fingers onto the upholstered chair with a muted thud. Claire crossed the room, picked it up, and carefully brushed an invisible speck of dust from the velvet before placing it back into his palm. You didn't take away my chance to forgive your past. She folded his fingers over the box. You took away my right to choose whether I wanted to marry into it. Olivia's shoulders sagged. She took one cautious step forward. Claire, I'm sorry. The apology hung quietly between them. Claire looked at her oldest friend, the woman who had stood beside her while choosing flowers, tasting wedding cakes, adjusting her veil, laughing through every rehearsal. I know you are. Her voice remained gentle. But every time you looked at me, you already knew something about my fiancé that I didn't. Outside, someone knocked softly on the bridal suite door before stopping. uncertain whether to interrupt. Claire walked toward the door and opened it herself. Family members waiting in the hallway looked up at once. Their conversations ended. Ethan and Olivia followed several steps behind, unable to remain hidden any longer. Claire faced both families beneath the warm chandelier light, then turned back toward Ethan and Olivia one final time. "You don't have to explain this to me anymore," she said quietly. "Now you're going to explain it to everyone." Writing. Edit. Claire stepped into the reception hall before anyone else could speak for her. The ballroom, glowing beneath crystal chandeliers and lined with towering arrangements of white roses, fell silent one table at a time. Forks rested against porcelain plates. Champagne glasses stopped halfway to waiting lips. Even the band lowered their instruments as the last note dissolved into the warm air, scented with vanilla frosting, fresh flowers, and brewed coffee. Ethan followed several steps behind, the velvet ring box still in his hand. Olivia walked more slowly, her blue satin dress whispering across the polished floor. Claire climbed the small stage where they had planned to share their first dance. The hardwood creaked softly beneath her heels. She reached for the microphone resting on its stand, wrapped her fingers around the cool metal, and looked across the faces that had gathered to celebrate a marriage that no longer existed. "Thank you for coming today," she said. Her voice carried evenly through the speakers without trembling. "Many of you traveled hundreds of miles to be here. You deserve honesty." No one interrupted. Claire looked briefly toward Ethan before continuing. Earlier today, during a wedding game, Ethan recognized Olivia by touch while he was blindfolded. A ripple of quiet confusion moved through the room before disappearing again. Claire did not rush. Afterward, I asked questions. I gave them every opportunity to explain. They told me they dated before Ethan and I ever met, and together they decided I never needed to know. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them again. He stepped toward the stage. "Everything she said is true." His voice sounded lower than anyone in the room had ever heard it. "We ended our relationship before Claire and I started dating. We never cheated, but we made the wrong decision by hiding it from her." Olivia slowly nodded. "I agreed to keep that secret. That was my choice too." The room remained completely still. Claire rested the microphone against her side and looked at the engagement ring still enclosed inside the velvet box. The afternoon sun streamed through the tall windows, striking the diamond until small points of light danced across the stage floor. She stepped down from the platform and stopped directly in front of Ethan. Without anger or hesitation, she took the ring from the box, held it in her open palm for one quiet moment, then gently placed it back into his hand. She closed his fingers around it herself. "This isn't ending because you had a past," she said. "It's ending because you built our future on a decision I was never allowed to make." Ethan's shoulders lowered. He did not argue. He did not reach for her. Olivia covered her mouth with one trembling hand, but remained where she stood. Claire removed her veil, sliding one pearl pin after another free until the sheer fabric rested across her forearm. She folded it carefully, walked to an empty chair beside the dance floor, and laid it across the seat as though returning something borrowed. Then she turned toward every guest gathered in the ballroom. "I'm grateful you came to celebrate love today," she said, "but I can't promise forever to someone after discovering trust was missing before we ever reached the altar." She set the microphone back onto its stand with a soft click that echoed through the silent room. Then she looked once more at Ethan, calm and unwavering. "I'm calling off this wedding. Writing. Edit. 6 months later, spring sunlight spilled through the broad windows of a quiet neighborhood cafe, turning the wooden tables honey gold while the aroma of freshly ground coffee and warm cinnamon rolls drifted through the room. Claire Bennett sat near the window in a simple cream sweater, a leather-bound notebook resting beside her untouched mug. The wedding gown, the veil, and the ballroom had become memories instead of destinations. She opened the notebook and crossed one final item from a list she had written the week after the canceled wedding. The page made a soft scratching sound beneath her pen. There were no more promises left to repair because she had stopped trying to repair the wrong one. Across town, Ethan Walker stood alone outside the jeweler where he had once purchased the engagement ring. The velvet box remained in his hand for several long moments before he quietly placed it on the counter inside. The polished glass display reflected his face beneath bright white lights, but there was nothing left to negotiate. Some purchases could be refunded. Some decisions never could. Olivia Hayes wrote Claire a handwritten letter 2 weeks after the wedding, then another one a month later. Claire read both at her kitchen table, where early morning light warmed the oak surface and the faint scent of toasted bread filled the apartment. She folded each letter carefully, placed them back inside their envelopes, and stored them in a drawer without replying. Forgiveness did not always reopen a door. Sometimes it simply allowed someone to walk away without carrying bitterness any farther. Time moved quietly. Summer arrived. On a bright Saturday afternoon, Claire attended another wedding as an ordinary guest seated halfway down the aisle. White roses lined the chapel once again, and a string quartet played softly beneath stained glass. Windows glowing with afternoon light. When the bride reached the altar, the groom looked at her as though no one else existed in the room. He reached for her hand without hesitation, and she smiled before saying a single word. Claire watched the moment in complete silence. There was no knot in her chest this time, only recognition. She finally understood the difference between certainty and assumption. After the ceremony ended, she stepped outside into the warm breeze, carrying the scent of blooming dogwoods and freshly cut grass. From her purse, she removed the invitation from the wedding that had never happened. The elegant ivory paper had remained folded since that day. She looked at it once, smiled faintly, then tore it cleanly in half before placing both pieces into a nearby recycling bin. Her phone vibrated inside her handbag. Ethan's name appeared on the screen with one final message. "I'm sorry for taking away your choice." Claire read the sentence slowly. Then she locked the screen without replying and slipped the phone back into her bag. She walked toward the parking lot as late afternoon sunlight stretched long shadows across the pavement, her footsteps steady against the warm concrete. The day her blindfolded fiancé recognized her best friend by touch had ended a wedding, but it also revealed the one truth she carried forward for the rest of her life. Love can survive a difficult past, but no marriage can survive a future built on a truth someone else decided you never deserved to know. Writing.